Good afternoon. We'll see if this works. This is good to be in Palm Springs. How many of you are local guys? Wow, it's been so long since I've been in Palm Springs, and I walked into the airport and I walked outside before I got my bags and I'm going, this is different. But I really like, I should be here more in January. I should, try to figure this out. To me, the weather's perfect. Now, we're going to take 4 one-hour presentations and put them all into 30 minutes. So, put your trays up, lock your seatbelts in, and let's get ready to fly with me today. Because what we're going to talk about, and I want you to think about change and think about sustainability. So we're going to be philosophical here for a little bit and try to take a little bit longer picture. And I promise you, before you slit your wrist halfway through, we are going to end up positive. Okay, I am an optimist at heart. In fact, I'm an irrational optimist. So all these people that think of me as a bear, they just don't know the real John. So we're going to see if we can let the irrational optimists come out here. There are decades that brilliant philosopher Lenin told us when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. 2001 was one of those decades, if you'll go back and think about it. China entered the WTO, the introduction of the euro, and 9/11. All of those have repercussions for the next 10 years. They were all significant events. But we didn't wake up one morning and go, wow, China's in the WTO. Things changed, but they did. Well, I think 2013 is one of those years we're going to look back and go, wow, things changed. It's because we're coming to the point of unsustainability. How many of you read my letters? Okay, the rest of you look around. It's a free letter. Get a clue. Okay. The price is really good. If something cannot be sustained, it will change. It's obvious. But human beings don't get that. That's not the way we grew up on the African savannas when we were chasing antelopes and dodging lions. We assumed that today would be like yesterday, which will be like tomorrow. We make linear projections into the future. Our stock has risen 10% for the last 4 months, therefore it's going to rise 10% every month. And we start thinking about, gee, in another 16 months it will have doubled. Wow! No, that's not the way life works. Things change. And trees don't grow to the sky. And we have to think about, when we say something's unsustainable, what do we mean? How is it going to change? I'll jump to where I'm going to be in a little bit. The United States owes something like $212 trillion, if you're Scott Burns and Kotlikoff, in future liabilities. 200 trillion on entitlements. I look at that $200 trillion and I don't blink. Doesn't make me nervous. If you sued me for $1 billion, I'd just laugh at you, because all you're trying to do is get my attention. If you sued me for $100,000, I'd get nervous, because that meant you want my money. Okay, we can't pay $200 trillion or $70 trillion. It's a nonsensical number. It's stupid. The more important question is, what happens when we realize we can't pay the $200 trillion? Now that is when we realize this is unsustainable. That's when we have to change. It's when they start taking the furniture away, you notice that maybe you need to file for bankruptcy. Okay? That's when you notice, they're cutting the credit cards up. The market's cutting you off. What is unsustainable? It's a world in which expenses rise faster than your income, whether it's on your human level, your personal level, or a state level, you know, we've got cities in California that are filing for bankruptcy. San Jose passed, you know, I thought that was an earthquake last spring when they had an election and they told their city workers, we're cutting you off. In fact, we're cutting your salaries and your pensions. We'll see how the courts rule on that. Interesting try for a liberal city. I thought that was fascinating because it's saying that voters are getting to the place where, nope, this is unsustainable. That's it. We're out of here. That's a tectonic plate shift. It's the end of the world as we know it, like the old song goes. And I feel fine. Actually, I'm better than fine because I'm excited about it being the end of the world. Because it's the end of things that I don't like. I don't like central banks printing money. I don't like governments being more important than the markets. I would like to wake up in the morning and just have to deal with what is the price of this stock, what is the likelihood that the underlying business is going to make money, and what is the net future value. Not have to deal with, okay, what are they going to print? Which country is going to print more? How do I figure out I'm tired of governments being the problem. So I'm excited about that we're coming to the end of that ability. By the way, guys, the end will happen over maybe the next 7 years. Things will change. We're going to get through this. I find that exciting. The 2020s are going to be awesome. We'll talk about why more in a little bit. Number one, what's unsustainable? Debt. It's the end of the world, developed world super cycle. You know, Greece has already found that. I was just there last month. It's 25% unemployment, 50% youth employment. They're getting ready to put $40 billion into 40 billion euros, so it's $50 billion, into their banks just to fund their banks in a country of 10 million people. Let's see, 50 billion, 10 million, 330 million, 33, 10. That would be 1.8 trillion US dollars if we were trying to do the same thing in the US. That's about 6 times what they effectively got in TARP. That's a hell of a lot of money. One little bitty country. Where the heck did it go? It went poof. The banks are insolvent. The businesses, I talked to business after business after business there. I mean, we had 36 meetings. Businesses are no longer worried about making a profit. They're simply trying to survive. Cash flow is the rule. Can I get enough money to get me to the next week? That's no way to live, but that's where they are because they cannot get any financing on any of their assets, on any, I mean, it's an insane way. And they're just trying to get to the place where their banks are functional. And while banks become a pejorative sometimes in our lingo, the reality is that we either have to have a banking system like we have, where we have to have private banking, and we're seeing the development of private credit. I talked about this 5 years ago when it was just a nascent beginning idea. It's now becoming mainstream. There are multi-deca-billion-dollar private funds, hedge funds in other worlds, that are basically banks that are lightly leveraged. By light, I mean 2 to 3 times leverage, not a 10-time fractional reserve leverage. And they are disintermediating the banks. In 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, banks are going to be an interesting business to be in because the big guys are going to be borrowing money directly. Private credit can do better than banks. And the little guys, which banks aren't servicing now, are going to be able to go directly to the new businesses, the startups, through crowdsourcing. Banking is going to become an increasingly difficult business and an increasingly commodity business. just as an aside. The second thing that's unsustainable is unbalanced entitlement promises, pensions, healthcare, demographics are the driver. It's not just in the US, Europe, Japan, all throughout. And China has terrible problems. It's governments all over the world. Oddly, one of the great mysteries of the world is that leftist socialist country that we think of as Sweden doesn't have an entitlement problem. It's because they had an entitlement problem in 1993. They went belly up. And they solved their entitlement problem by saying, we're going to give you all of these wonderful benefits, but they go down if we have a recession. So your benefits are tied to GDP. They don't rise faster than the economy grows. Everything went in balance. What a cool way to do things. If we tied our entitlement programs to GDP, we could just, so your Social Security, we have a recession, goes down. Oops, we can't do that, that's heartless. Well, it's not heartless, it means we can afford it. But we're not going to do that for a while, but I just find it interesting that the country we think of as a socialist, leftist, nirvana, actually has the far more rational way to provide pensions and health care. I want us to think about something, the world and other parts, the world's not linear. We are seeing that there are things that are sustainable, and they're becoming even more sustainable. Food, energy, technological change, human adaptation, they're all accelerating. We're not going to run out of food. We're not going to run out of energy. I mean, I'm going to offend some people here, but really, you peak oil guys, get a grip. I mean, we're not going to run out of energy. We may run out of cheap energy. Okay, that's 5% of our input cost. It goes up 20%. Who gives a rip? I mean, really, it's not that big a deal. We'll just punch a different hole in the ground. Go to the Balkan. God, I did a tour of the Balkan, helicopter, and it looks like Bridgeport, Texas, when I grew up as a kid. I mean, they're punching holes in the ground everywhere. And now they found 3 layers of oil below the Balkan, bigger than the Balkan. So now when they're going to go to a pad of about an acre or 2 acres, they're going to punch 16 wells from one pad because they go down 2 miles and over 2 miles. And then they go over another 2 miles, they get another pad, they punch a bunch of holes in the ground. They found another oil patch, gas patch in Texas that's going to be bigger than Eagle Ford. It's just, and this is just the US. It's everywhere. Real quick, anybody, where was the first oil well drilled? Wrong. First of all, they drilled an oil well about 6 months earlier in Canada. Who knew that? And the year before and the year before that, they drilled oil wells, same technology, in Poland and Romania. Yeah. I mean, we in the US think, well, no. Poland or Romania, they were there first. And there's still all that oil and gas there. There's tons of this stuff everywhere. It may just cost us $80 or $100 or $200 to get it out. Okay, big deal. We're not going to run out of food. We may run out of food in convenient places. So we truck it, we move it, we ship it, we'll get it there. That's what humans do. We adapt. There is no limit to the ability, other than governments, of human beings being able to adapt. Technological change, oh dear God, have mercy, it's accelerating. There's more and more cool stuff. I'm getting a phone next week that I'm going to take to Cafajate with my partners down to Argentina in at Casey Research, they've got a resort down there. I'm going to go down and finish a book on the future of employment. And this phone is just a little Motorola phone, except that it can switch from cell to Wi-Fi instantaneously. So when I'm in a Wi-Fi area, I can have a phone that looks like my office phone for $19 a month. All the text, data, and voice I can eat. That's cool. Unless you're AT&T. AT&T is not going to like this. By the way, it rolls over in the US, it'll roll over to Sprint. So AT&T will like it even less if you happen to be out of a Wi-Fi area. What they found is already in our world today, 60% of the people are in a Wi-Fi zone so that they can disintermediate the cell. Eventually, it'll be ubiquitous Wi-Fi. In 10 years, we'll wonder who's using that expensive cell stuff. Because it's cheap, it's free. We're gonna have free Wi-Fi. I love free. I mean, it won't really be free, but it's gonna be really, really cheap and really, 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 really fast. I cannot wait, especially when they can wire it directly into my brain. It's coming, guys. Our kids will adopt it because it makes their games go faster. If you want to keep up with your grandkids, you're going to have to get wired, okay? Talk about getting turned on. This is a way cool world. Now, where are the sources of current instability? Japan, Europe, the US, and China at some point. Maybe not this year, but it's coming. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Dear gods have mercy, we're only 40 minutes behind. Okay. Japan, I've often said, is a bug in search of a windshield. Okay? I mean, I've been saying that now for 3 years. I wrote it in my book. The guys that have laughed, some of you didn't laugh because you've heard it 7 times now. But it's true. But I've never really bet that way. I've just been telling people, except last December, I've now put the biggest chunk of my portfolio is short Japan. I've shoved the chips on the table. I didn't just put a few out there. This is the time. I'm afraid the train's going to start moving out. It's time to do it. The yen is going to 100, then 125, then 150, then 200. We'll see after that. 300. Korea is not going to be happy when you can buy a Lexus cheaper than you buy a Kia. What are they going to do? Well, they'll have to respond. So will China, so will Vietnam, so will Thailand, so will Malaysia. Oops, what about Europe? Europe can't let Japan have that much of an advantage over their tool machines because that means Germany is getting its brains beaten out by the Japanese. Understand, the Japanese government may be getting ready to try to destroy the value of their pensions, but those companies make cool stuff. One of the best performing indexes of last year was the Japanese Robotics Index. They make robots. They have intellectual property. You want to be not just long stocks. You want to be long intellectual property in Japan, short the yen. I mean, if you're Samsung and LG, you are not going to be happy when Panasonic and Sony are beating your brains out. 10% of all the 42-inch screens in the world are made in one factory, I'm told, in Japan by Panasonic. They put stuff in the beginning, TVs come out at the end, there's 15 people running the factory. I can run this math if you take the yen to 150. When you buy a TV, do you say, oh, I've got to have a Korean TV. I want the LG as opposed to the Panasonic. Do you care? No, you don't care. Is it pretty? Are there little dots? Is it all? Fine, click, I'll buy this one. It's $100 cheaper than that one. It's a commodity. World's getting ready to change. I want you to look at this. This is from the Bank of International Settlements. There are 2 pieces here on this flash that look like each other. The 2 that look most like each other. Remember the cartoons that you have when you're a little kid, you see the grandparents, which look most like? Greece and France. Just shift them 5 years. France next year will be the new Greece. France is going to be the problem that the euro has. That's when we see the final, are we really committed to keeping the euro together? Because the Germans wrote the check for the Greeks. They're going to write the check for the Spanish. They're going to, they did it for the Irish. The Irish, by the way, got a huge, huge deal 3 weeks ago when the ECB approved them shifting their promissory notes that they were paying high interest rates on to very low interest rates, 30 and 40-year bonds that have balloons at the far end. Okay, I'm telling you, that bank debt that I told you 3 years ago that the Irish would never pay, because the Irish Prime Minister looked me in the eye and said, we're never going to pay it. And he signed the deal promising to pay, but he knew that they would never pay it. Because the IMF at the table, when they took the loan out to protect the euro, said, we'll work it out with you. We'll figure it out. When Greece doesn't have to pay, and all these other guys, we'll figure it out. And this is how they're figuring it out. By the way, it was very clever. The Irish came up with this when it wasn't the ECB. They came up with a very clever way to basically not pay it. When they create a fiscal union of some kind and they merge all the debt, watch. They'll throw this $30 billion of euros into the bucket. It'll just get subsumed. And this is the president calling me, but I'm not going to answer. Oh, you'll... yeah, I can't let you answer what you'd say. I know you. You would not be nice to the president. You have to be polite. It's his office, even though he is taking us down a primrose path. Okay, a thought about austerity. Guys, of course it doesn't work. It's austerity. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, you cut government spending. You are going to cut GDP. That's the rules. And you cut your government spending because you've run out of the ability to borrow money. I mean, if they want to continue to loan Greece 10% of their budget, okay, they could do that. But who's going to do that? The Germans said, no, you got to cut it down. And the Greeks are doing it, but that's why they've got 25% unemployment. Austerity doesn't work. It doesn't make you grow. That's why it's called austerity. Okay? So, there's no magic formula. If you spend too much, you got to cut back. If you get in debt, you got to cut. C'est la vie. C'est la guerre. There's one bubble to rule them all. That's the U.S. federal obligations. The biggest bubble in the history of the world has not been housing. It wasn't gold in the 80s. Certainly not gold now. It wasn't credit. Government. The biggest bubble in the history of the world is government. It's getting ready to burst because we've made promises that we can't keep. We're not going to be happy, or some people aren't going to be happy. You guys will probably be happy. But no, there are not going to be a lot of people happy when they find out government can't keep their promises and they're going to have to restructure things. You think the Greeks have been happy? Oh God, they're not a happy group of people. But there's nothing they can do because promises were made that can't be kept by politicians that didn't think they'd have to keep them. Now they're having to figure out how to do something different. We're going to go through a massive global demographic change. The Chinese are going to fall off the table in 10 years as a function of their one-child policy. We've never seen anything like it in history of the world ever. They now have more people leaving the workforce than they ever have in terms of people who've retired and young people. So their actual workforce to population is beginning to shrink this year. And then they hit the one-child thing, boom, gone. Fascinating. We've never seen a Japan in the history of the world where a country just slowly dies. But we're getting ready to see, we're going to see what it looks like in Japan, but then we're going to see it in Europe. They're just not breeding. You know, I've got 7 kids. I did my part. Well, actually, I only adopted 5, so somebody else did a part, but I took some responsibility. Okay. I paid for their college educations. Dear God, that's why I'm still running around the world working. Yeah. It's a great experiment. We're seeing the economic theories of Keynes and von Mises and Irving Fisher, my personal favorite, and Friedman, 4 dead white guys. And the governments of the world are experimenting on our economic body without benefit of anesthesia. And right now they're using Keynesian economics. We're going to find out that it was the part where he says it's okay to spend to stimulate the economy, then you, in good times, you're supposed to, raise taxes and pay the deficits down. We didn't do that part. This is the neo-Keynesian, the Krugman stuff. By the way, can we officially write Krugman off as an economist? Yes. He is now, when he recommends $1 trillion coin, that puts him into political hack. Okay? I mean, honest to God, anybody that understands any of the plumbing of the Treasury or the Fed understands that it's not legal, it's not possible. It doesn't work. I mean, not that it's just a bad idea. It's not possible under the rules. And so for an economist, quote unquote, to come along and say, let's have $1 trillion coin, that puts you into the political hack category. If George W. had tried to do that, of course he would have been against it. He annoys me. Besides the fact that he plagiarizes me. But I don't care about that. It's a new economic paradigm. We're in the world where 2 more economists are going to become the drivers. It's going to be Schumpeter with creative destruction, and Hyman Minsky with the Minsky moment, with the stability leads to instability. These are the guys whose works and thoughts we should be reading. Finally, it's what I call the Millennium Wave. We're in a world of accelerating change and abundance. I'll have this book out next year. I've been promising it forever, but I actually will get around to writing it after I do the other 2 books. But it's as if electricity and the steam engine and telecommunications and TV and sailing all came together in the same 20 years. That's what we're getting ready to see. We're going to see more change in the next 10 years than we saw all of last century. Whoosh! It's accelerating faster and faster and faster. You have got to learn to adapt to change, not fight it. The biggest problem we're going to have as society is that governments are going to want to protect people from change when there is no protection. And they're going to want to protect people from change by taking your money to help people protect them. We don't have enough money to protect people from change. It's going to be happening that fast. That's actually good news. Because number one, the change is fun. We're all going to be living longer. Social Security is really screwed. That's a technical term. I mean, if we all live 10 years longer, and I'm actually eligible for Social Security now. I'm 63. And I probably should take it so they'll give me something, because eventually they're going to say, I make too much money and they won't give it to me, which is what they should do. We should recognize that it's welfare and not a retirement plan. I mean, there's no money saved. There is no lockbox. We all know that. I'm positive about the future. We are going to make a transition to sustainability from now to 2018, 19, 20, 2020, somewhere in there. It's a great reset button. The old blue screen of death. Some of you remember the old blue screen of death? You get the blue screen of death and you'd scream and there's nothing you could do. And you couldn't even turn your computer off. You had to go unplug it, wait 15 seconds, plug it back in, then restart it. Anything that you hadn't saved up to the moment that you got the blue screen of death you lost, that's where we are. You need to be making sure that you save your data, save your money, so when we hit the blue screen of death, you're okay. Because they're going to unplug everything and they're going to go back and plug it in and we can start again. That's
a positive, guys, because we need to reset it. We need to change the system, and it'll happen. How exciting. So we're going to get to this new world about the same time the secular bear market is over. About the same time central banks have realized that maybe all this QE is not a good idea. And we'll have, it'll be the 80s again. And we'll actually be able to invest like rational people. You know, so save all your models, the models that you use where you look at past performance and try to project, you know, those are worthless now. Don't use them. It's the old past performance is not indicative of future results. It's worse than that. It's misleading. It's deadly. Don't do it. If somebody shows you a model, shut your eyes, close your book, meditate. Don't pay attention to them. Models, the technical term we use in economics in Texas is bullshit. Okay? They're just don't do them because they don't work. Now, in 5 years, 7 years, you'll be able to bring those models, dust them off, plug them back in, and we will once again be in a world that has some predictability, and you know, we can model the accelerating change. Life will be good again. Now, what are the characteristics of sustainable? We want to invest in things that central banks can't print. It's a real simple concept. But it's not, I mean, everyone in this room, when I said that, what was your first thing? Gold. How many of you thought gold immediately? Okay, you all thought gold. Okay, it's not just gold, guys. They can't print technology companies. They can't print corn. There's a lot of things that central banks can't print. You just have to make sure you get out of the way of their currency issues. What's sustainable? Something that serves basic human needs. Food, clothing, housing, social networks. We need social networks. I mean, why do we come together in groups? It's because that's what we did, 100,000 years ago. We got around the fire, somebody told us stories. We tried to put ourselves in the grand context of things. We had relationships. Now we use social networks for that. Our networks are now global rather than local. My friends are all over the world. It's not just the million friends who I've got on my reader base, but I've got people all over the world. And we stay in contact. It's a social network. And that, I don't know whether that's going to be Facebook or not. I don't use Facebook. I've been told I need to. My secretary posts stuff there. If I want to find out what my kids are doing, that's where I go. Something that's sustainable is adaptable and it's anti-fragile. There's a new book out by Nassim Taleb that I'm not reading. I'm thinking. I'm thinking through it. I can't just sit and read it. It's not that long a book. Normally I'd have been through it in the first 2 hours and gone on to the next one. I'm having to slowly think through it. It's an important book because he says that it's not just, we don't have a word for anti-fragile in the English language or in any language at all. Anti-fragile is something that thrives on change. The more you try to hurt it, the more it prospers and grows. It's not just robust. Robust is I can deal with the problems and survive. Anti-fragile says I need the problems to make me better. And that's how we need to start thinking about our portfolios. A fragile system is one where we try to protect people from change, and we keep protecting and protecting and protecting, like our banks, like our credit system, until you have one big crisis. Technologies, communications are adaptable and they're anti-fragile. Something that's sustainable creates ever-increasing abundance at lower costs. That may force you change. What was the biggest deflationary period in the United States? 1870s, 1880s, because we increased our ability to produce food by magnitudes. In 1850, the number one job, like 80% of the people were employed on the farms. The number one job in 1900 was personal servant. 20% of the women in Chicago were maids, otherwise known as a labor-saving device, because they washed the dishes and the clothes and swept. Somebody had to take care of the horses, guys. We know what horses do. They didn't have cars then. I mean, if you became middle class, the first thing a wife wanted was somebody to help, because it was hard to be a wife. Ever increasing abundance. That's where we're going. We're not in a world where, oh my God, we need guns and store our food. Maybe in here or there, a little, whatever. World is getting better and better. Now, that tells me I'm at an end, because he's coming up here and also telling me we're in end. Thank you very, very much. We're going to have a panel, and I'll try to keep from getting into too big an argument with Peter. Thank you very much.